All right, okay. Today we have Taimur, who is the CEO and co-founder of Causal. Welcome to the show.
Hey Ben, very happy to be here.
Awesome. When you tell the listeners slash watchers a little bit about you and about what Causal is.
Yeah, sure. So I'm Taimur. In my very brief career so far, I started off working as a data scientist. I was then the first employee at a company called Retool. And for just over a year now, I've been working on Causal with my co-founder, Lucas. We're trying to build a better way to work with numbers. So anything relating to doing calculations, visualizing data, and communicating numbers to other people, we want to be a much better way to do that than spreadsheets. And so right now, people are using Causal for everything from financial forecasts for their business to pricing calculators to show their potential customers, and then even personal finance stuff like, should I buy a house? Should I buy this car versus that one? That kind of thing.
Awesome. So what's the usual calculation with should you rent versus should you buy?
Yeah, I think it mostly comes down to your estimates for how you think the stock market is going to perform compared to the housing market. I actually think the non-quantitative considerations are more important for buying versus renting. For example, if you're like 22 and you want to travel the world and stuff, probably better to rent and not have a house kind of weighing you down. If you're sort of 40 with a couple of kids, the stability of having a house is probably quite nice for you. So I think a lot of people actually discount the sort of non-numbers stuff where, and I think the emotional side is probably more important there.
Yeah, that makes sense. I always find myself trying to justify one or the other, but I don't really have any good arguments for like when everyone like it always comes down to renting, just money's going out the window. And I'm like, I know that like there's a good answer here, but I just never know what it is, especially in the stuff. So
yeah, it's not quite as simple as like renting is money down the window, because typically the amount you'd pay in rent for a property, let's say like a 2-bed flat in London, will be a bit less than the amount you'd be paying monthly for a mortgage for the same 2-bed flat. And so you can invest the difference in the stock market. And so then it becomes like, should I buy a house and pay down this mortgage and get this asset, which is my property, or should I rent and get assets in the form of stocks? And both those are worth something, and it's worth doing a bit of number crunching there for sure.
So write that down, make sure that's my go-to answer.
Nice.
Awesome. So let's dive into your story a bit. So did you data science at university? Is that where you sort of started?
Yeah, sort of. So I studied maths at university, and my course was very sort of theoretical. So we didn't learn programming and that kind of stuff. But I've always kind of been tinkering around with tech stuff. I started dabbling with Photoshop when I was like 12, and after a few years, eventually learned how to code and make websites and things like that. And so the sort of maths stuff plus the coding stuff meant that data science seemed like a good fit. And so that was kind of my first real job that I had out of university.
Awesome. How did you get into? I think you know about Retool then. How did you get in there? What's the story?
Yeah, so the Retool founders, we all just went to university together. We used to do hackathons and things back at university. And yeah, they started Retool. Seemed to be going well. I joined them for a bit. I don't think I really played any role in their success. I think they're onto something really good, and I sort of did a few things here and there for a while. But yeah, no, Retool's great.
Also, are they British founders, or were they?
They're actually both American, but they came to the UK for undergrad for university.
Okay, that's interesting. Yeah, I never knew Link having that. So, was there anything in that sort of story piece of like, okay, I like what a early stage startup looks like, feels like, I want to do my own thing? What was the like motivation to kick you to go and do Causal?
Yeah, so I think I've always kind of wanted to do my own thing. Like as a teenager, I was always trying to like make a quick buck with various online schemes and stuff. And to be honest, I wish I'd spent less time trying to make a quick buck with schemes and a bit more time just trying to build something meaningful. But it eventually started sort of building more meaningful things. And so I've kind of always wanted to do my own thing. When I was working as a data scientist, that was my first exposure to the kinds of stuff that non-technical people are doing with computers. So that was the first time I saw how most people are using spreadsheets. And it seemed like there's kind of two buckets of use cases for spreadsheets. There's like number crunching stuff, and then there's everything else. And so the company that I was working for had a bunch of like financial forecasts and things in spreadsheets. And then they were using it for like project management and all of that kind of thing. And I think companies like Airtable and Notion, they're really trying to take over the sort of everything else use cases, so like project management, having lists of things, managing business processes. But it really struck me that there's got to be a better way to do all the number crunching stuff that people are doing in spreadsheets. And so based on some of the problems that the company I was working for had with their spreadsheet models, we kind of started to think about, okay, what would a better number crunching tool actually look like? And that's kind of what we're trying to build with Causal.
Awesome. What are some of the main use cases you see people using it for? Because I know like spreadsheets is a massive thing. I'm sure we'll get into a bit as well. But yeah, you know, there's always 3 or 4 things that I'm trying to do. Mostly, I'm trying to do some sort of pivot table of some sort that does something.
Yeah, so I mean, so far, a lot of the use cases are to do with forecasting. So probably like one of the biggest use cases is financial modeling for early stage companies. And so for example, some of our customers are CEOs or finance people at companies like 5 to 50 people in size, where they need a financial forecast that they can look at every month and report back to investors and report back to the team. And so they're using Causal for that. And then it turns out that basically in every niche, there are different consulting firms that need to do some form of number crunching. So if you are a marketing agency, then your clients will come to you and they'll say, hey, you know, this is our budget. How many leads can you get us via Google ads and Facebook ads and so on? And so then you need to build a small forecast to show the client that, hey, this is like the strategy. We'll put this much in Google, this much in Facebook. And we think after 6 months, we can get you like 100 leads or whatever. And so, yeah, there's probably like a slight bias towards finance type stuff because obviously there's a lot of numbers involved there. But it seems like everything is kind of trending towards being more quantitative. And so in basically every niche, there's going to be some form of forecasting or number crunching. But sort of one of the biggest pain points with spreadsheets that we found is that it's very hard to actually present them in a nice way to other people. So, you know, if you have like a financial model for your company and you want to sort of be a bit more transparent with your team, you could send a spreadsheet around to everyone in the company and your investors and stuff. But most people's eyes will just kind of glaze over. There'll be a lot of numbers, a lot going on. And so one of the things that we're trying to do is have a way to actually present these kinds of things in a nicer way. And so Causal automatically turns your model into like an interactive dashboard where people can play around with the numbers and see the charts update and that kind of stuff without getting overwhelmed by just a bunch of spreadsheet cells.
Awesome. Is it going to be like embeddable? Do you have embeddable things too, and embeddable charts in other presentations and stuff too?
Yeah, absolutely. And so like a lot of our users have actually embedded causal models inside things like blog posts and landing pages. One of the more interesting use cases that we wouldn't have been able to think of ourselves, to be honest, is that a lot of companies need to show potential customers what the return on their investment would be of using their product. And so they often use Causal to build like an ROI calculator that they then embed on their landing page. And so then new customers can go on the website and see, oh, okay, if I have this many employees and you know, based on my sort of custom circumstances, this is what the pricing would be for this product. And this is how much money it would save me in the long run, that kind of stuff.
Awesome. Yeah, that was going to be my follow-up, which is those people always want to build like little calculators, data calculators or pricing calculators. So this would be a really good way to do that. I think we might do that on our pricing page then. I think we'll look into
amazing.
a bit for our gut teams. I think that'd be interesting.
Yeah, that'd be awesome.
How long has Causal been going for now?
It's pretty early days. We've been working on this for just over a year now. I'd say since like January of this year, it's been at a state where people have actually been using it in production for work stuff. And since like May, we started charging as well. So we started to get some paying customers, which has been nice.
Always comes fine.
Yeah.
How have you been getting these customers so far? Is it more in like inbound stuff or?
Yeah, so I think for us, it's mostly been inbound so far. I think we get a lot from like word of mouth via Twitter and Hacker News and that kind of thing. I think people really like the sort of animated GIFs that we put out, sort of demonstrating different product features. So those tend to do quite well on Twitter. So yeah, we get a decent amount of inbound. But I think we also need to be a bit more targeted about like specific use cases that we think the product is really good for today, and try and sort of figure out ways to reach those people. And so we're doing some sort of outbound and kind of marketing stuff as well.
Yeah, you know those, obviously those data GIFs or like I guess small videos that have, so we've got like the countries or something and then the numbers and then it's like the different countries moving up and down.
Yeah, those animated things. Yeah. Those are
Can
awesome.
you build those with Causal? Because I think that would be like an awesome way to get around, and you can do that for all sorts, right?
Yeah, I mean, it's not a feature right now, but if we have a potential customer who, for whom that would be like a game changer, we're always happy to build new things if it makes sense.
Well, I swear they always go around and people love them and like, oh, how do I create one of these? And I don't know if anyone ever knows how to do it. I mean, that's like a side project marketing right there.
Yeah.
On Hacker News, that'll go man, I'm sure.
Yeah. Hacker News would love it.
Claim the idea for that one. And how do you see Causal fitting in with the no-code world? I mean, spreadsheets in general seem to be. Some people talk about it being like the original programming language. It's like what people really think of as like the basic of the basic.
Yeah.
Is it stem from that in any way, or is it just more of a you don't have to code to use this product? So.
Yeah. So I think spreadsheets are amazing. Before spreadsheets, normal people couldn't really do anything on a computer, and then I guess spreadsheets came along specifically to do like number crunching, like calculations and stuff. And then people sort of figured out hey, I can sort of lay things out however I want on this grid, and I can have custom formatting like colors and things, and some basic interactions like drop downs, and all of a sudden you're actually building software, right? So I think spreadsheets are great. I think like I said, I think there's sort of two buckets of ways to use a spreadsheet. The first is for like number crunching, it's like calculation stuff, which is what we're trying to target, and the second is for things like managing business stuff and project management and all the other kinds of things people are doing with spreadsheets. It feels like number crunching is a big enough use case that having a tool that makes it significantly better would actually be pretty valuable. That's basically the thesis behind our whole company, is to make the number crunching stuff so much better that people would actually switch over from a spreadsheet. But we definitely want to play nicely with sort of the rest of the ecosystem. We were recently part of Airtable's blocks competition, and so we actually have a Causal Airtable block, so you can view forecasts and things within your Airtable view without having to actually leave the product. And so in terms of like data integrations, we definitely want to like work very nicely with the other tools that people are using.
Yeah, I think the Airtable blocks, they have like graphs and stuff, which I find quite different. I think they're just quite basic in what they can do, right? So yeah, we should definitely do some sort of tutorial or something about that scripting block. I think that'd be awesome.
Yeah, that'd be sweet.
And then so we looking to do things with like Zapier integrations and things like that. So I mean, I'm just again scheming solutions where you can have someone fill in a bunch of stuff, do the pricing calculator, and then they get sent an invoice like automatically to do that sort of thing. Gone through.
We're actually talking to a customer who wants to do exactly that right now. They basically want to have like a type form on their website where the customer enters some details. Here's how many users I'll have. Here's my like current usage of this particular thing, and then that type form basically triggers like a Zap, which sends an API request to Causal, which creates like a customized version of a pricing calculator for that particular customer, and then Zapier sort of sends that out in an email. And so you go from this like form of fill in your details to here's like a custom pricing quote where you can actually see the charts and the figures.
I can definitely think of use cases and stuff there too. The tutorial example stuff on our site. What's your feeling of this whole no-code movement as a thing, and like a new thing, and now being called a movement and all that sort of stuff? Any strong feelings on it?
Yeah, I mean, I'm a big fan. I mean, it feels like, the whole history of software has kind of been about like no code. I mean, you create software so that you can do something without the other person having to write code to do it themselves, right? And so it's nice that it finally has a name. I think like spreadsheets have kind of been doing this for a while. Like Salesforce was basically on the no code movement back in the very early days. It's kind of unsexy because it's a CRM and like a enterprise kind of thing, but they were actually very ahead of the curve in terms of thinking about this stuff. I think like the most recent kind of wave of no code and kind of the sort of movement, I think probably like the two main hallmarks that stand out to me is that first, it's kind of about letting people do things that they couldn't do before, but then these things are also now much more kind of dynamic rather than static. So for example, Photoshop, 10 years ago would let you manipulate images without having to know how to do graphics programming. It's not quite no code though, because it's still very static. Whereas something like Figma lets you do the same thing, but now you can have like interactions and sort of prototyping and that kind of stuff. And so it's becoming a lot more dynamic. And so it feels like the sort of, doing things you couldn't do before and doing them in like a dynamic and interactive way seem to be like the two main hallmarks of the current movement. And that's kind of what we're trying to do with Causal as well. We want people to be able to do more sophisticated number crunching than is possible in spreadsheets. But at the same time, we want them to be able to sort of present it to other people in an interactive way, connected to their data sources so that it's always up to date, all that kind of stuff.
Yes. Do you think that's why there's an inflection point now? Like now is the point of no code where things like Squarespace, Wix, and Weebly and things like that have been around for a while, but people never called them no code and still like almost don't call them no code, but really do fit into that term still. What do you think has been? Do you think it's those two things that you just said that has made it like be a thing now?
Yeah, I think so. I think there's also like a sort of critical mass that was probably recently reached where you now have enough of these things that kind of connect to each other in enough ways that you can actually do really powerful stuff. So I think something like Zapier like really ties the ecosystem together. Like before something like Zapier, you have all these tools, which I guess on their own would be considered kind of no-codey things. But then something like Zapier is like the glue that ties them all together and lets you sort of take things to the next level. So I think a few products like Zapier have probably heralded the movement quite significantly, even if a lot of these tools like Wix and stuff have been around for quite a while.
Yeah, no, I agree. I spoke to someone at Intersect Labs who was a data scientist. They do like data analysis basically.
Oh yeah.
And I was saying the no-code movement seems like what wasn't called the data science, but it was
okay.
it wasn't there wasn't a like it wasn't such thing as a data scientist a while ago. I don't know how many years. Don't want to shoot us off my foot. And then it was like all these big companies sort of recognized the use case for a data scientist as a role, and then that became a thing. And then there's tools that come out around that. There's communities like Kaggle that came around about data science and pushing it forward, and these challenges on other people. And to me, it feels like no code is sort of in that sort of realm where there needs to be some sort of role. I don't know what it's going to be called, but that's another thing. But then there's like these communities that are pushing these things forward, and even the tools themselves don't necessarily realize what is possible with their tool until the community gets their hands on it and says, I'm going to just I understand what your use case is meant to be for this, but I'm going to sort of push this a bit further. Do you think it feels a bit similar to that type of movement too?
Yeah, I think the point about like naming this role as like data science or whatever, that's actually really important, because back when I had a real job, there were a couple of people within the company who weren't actually technical. They were like PMs or something, but they happened to be like very good at spreadsheets and very good at Zapier. And so they were basically like superpowers within the company of like, these guys can do basically anything. And yeah, there's no specific role for that, but I think every company probably has a few of these people who are really, really valuable because they have that skill set. And they're probably things like product managers and stuff like that right now. But I think it'll be very interesting if like we get to a point where every company has a no code specialist who just like sorts out the company's internal workflows and things like that.
Yeah, I do think there's something there, and MakerPad has to be. We almost have to will it into existence. I think we have to show look, there's someone who can work with these things and do this type of role, and they're called a no-coder or whatever.
Right.
But yeah, there's so much education that needs to happen first, and there's almost the first wave of this seems to be like the creators, the want-to-be makers, the entrepreneurs who are like, oh, I can do this stuff without needing to have a developer.
Yeah.
And then I think we need it needs to spill into the creators like that who work companies who are like, oh, there's got to be a better way to do this spreadsheet stuff. Like
Yeah, exactly.
And I'm willing to find out what it is, rather
Yeah,
than just like, okay, I'll copy and paste it, and I'll send it to the team
yeah,
over in whatever country that does this for us.
yeah,
Um, but I think
yeah.
there's like,
I think
well, yeah,
it just needs a good name. Like I've seen a bunch of sort of no code consultants pop up over the past few months while we've been digging into the space, and we're sort of talking with some of them about helping them to use Causal as part of their like no code suite of tools. And so they're already consultants sort of offering no code expertise to companies. I think yeah, it's just a matter of time. It just needs like a killer name for like this role.
that's the problem, and people keep asking about it, and I've talked about it on this podcast a few times. And there's like a big debate of, do we call it no code? Why should we? Why shouldn't we? Half the
Yeah,
argument is like, why do we give a fuck? Like, that's just what people call it. Just call it that.
yeah,
And the other side is like, well, I do care because I don't want that role to be called like no coder. It just doesn't
right,
feel good enough. Like data
right, yeah,
scientist sounds like a cool.
yeah,
Maybe
yeah,
it's because people think a no coder is more like a dumbed down version of, okay, you can't code, so you're doing like the more basic stuff, so you're a no
yeah,
coder.
yeah, yeah.
Which isn't the case, but we need some sort of in between that makes it sound more intelligent, I think.
Yeah, I think data scientist probably sounds better than it actually is, but no coder sounds a lot worse than it should than it actually is.
Yeah. There's a bit around somehow, and it makes it sound really. I mean, I would do wonder whether it's just going to be some sort of software developer. I think it's like this developer or engineer seems to
Yeah,
like, even if it's just like no code engineer, that like adds a nice flick at the end
yeah,
of like intelligence, right? So maybe it's something like that.
yeah. And I mean, it seems like even in terms of like engineering, you know, I've dabbled in engineering stuff over the years, and you're always encouraged not to build stuff from scratch. Like if there's an existing thing, or if you can like tie together a couple of these existing tools, that's almost always a better solution. And now with stuff like Retool, you know, for basically all internal software, if you're writing it from scratch, that's probably not the right way to do it. And so it feels like even engineering is trending more towards sort of no code style stuff rather than like fully custom code for everything all the time.
Yeah, I think that's where there's like this weird take sides argument happening where it's like, well, you're on the code side or on the no code side. You
Yeah,
see,
yeah,
all the smart developers I know are like, yeah, no code's great. I can just build this thing without, I'd have to write the same 100 lines of code for the thing that I worked on
yeah,
every single
yeah,
time. I think there's just people worried about what's going to happen to like their job. And I think there's always that. And even things, I mentioned on the podcast the other day about there's automation, and Naval was talking with Matt Ridley. He wrote How Innovation Works, and he talked about how they talk about automation. Why are people so scared of it? Because they think it's going to take people's jobs. But over
yeah,
the years, like lorries were invented or came about. Don't fact check me on this, but lorries came about because the railways were an efficient way to deliver stuff to certain areas. So then it's all, and then it's like automating lorry driving. It's not trying to replace the lorry driver. It's just making everything more efficient. And then if everything, like jobs become more creative, everyone gets freed up to be more creative. And if automation would get to a point where everything was solved, we'd all just be relaxing, making videos, making podcasts, and reading
yeah,
books.
yeah. Yeah, living the dream, exactly. Yeah, I think the creativity thing is really important. It seems like nowadays the way people are thinking about their careers is also very different to say like 40 years ago. Like the dream 40 years ago would probably be to join at the bottom of some big established company, work your way up there over the next 40 years, and then you know when you're sort of 40, 50 years old, then you have like a good salary, live like a comfortable life. It seems like nowadays. I think that there's just a lot more sort of uncertainty. People are moving around a lot more, and everyone's kind of cottoning on to the fact that it's definitely helpful if you aren't completely reliant on an employer for your well-being. And so everyone's trying to start like side hustles and things like that, and basically trying to do their own creative stuff on the side. And I think that's partly why sort of things like Webflow and tools that like let you set up your own shop or your own website, your own blog, all of this kind of stuff has really taken off because there's kind of been a shift in the way people think about sort of work and the rest of their life.
Yeah, I mean, my dad's generation, it was like if you started a business, you started some sort of like car garage, or you started something physical that had a thing. There was no like, oh, I spun up I spun up a newsletter and then I spun up a shop
Yeah.
for selling swag, and then I do podcasts or something. Like that wasn't a thing. And my dad
Yeah.
did the thing that you said. He went into a company at 20 whatever and has been there ever since, and just like worked his way up the whole thing. That's what they
Yeah.
did.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think like this whole pushing economy, I think everyone knows someone who's got some sort of side hustle or online thing that has made them income, which then makes it like real and tangible to be like, oh wait,
Yeah.
if they can do that, I could definitely do something with this.
Yeah.
So I think it's more of the figuring out where you can have multiple streams of income and diversify that a bit more, because
Yeah.
things like COVID really fuck stuff up when
Yeah.
you think about like people relying on things. You can't always rely on something happening. Hopefully this never happens again in our lifetime at least. But
Yeah.
it's like it makes you think of where do I enjoy stuff and can I do something that carves up a piece of the internet? But then I wonder what point does this become? Everyone has a side hustle of some sort. It's like everyone you know has an email newsletter. It's like, okay, there's going to be like another shift then to something else.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I'm a big fan of like the sort of passion economy or whatever you want to call it, side hustles and that kind of thing. My only worry is that we might go too far in that direction where everyone feels the need to be sort of monetizing everything all of the time. And I feel like we're already in this weird place where sort of there's like an underlying narrative generally that your sort of self-worth and your sort of value as a human being depends on the amount of economic output that you have. And I think now that like you can sort of measure these things a lot more, like how many YouTube subscribers do you have? How many Instagram followers do you have? How much money are you making from your newsletter and stuff like that? I think we need some like cultural adjustment to change the way we think about like ourselves and the people around us. Because I think I've definitely felt this myself, where it's like I'm sort of tying my self-esteem and self-worth to my economic productivity, and based on stuff I see online and based on talking to friends, it feels like a lot of other people feel that way as well. So I feel like we need some sort of cultural correction while still moving in this direction of more people doing side hustles and things like that.
Yeah, exactly. And I wonder what that thing looks like. And I've been diving into Barstool Sports recently just because I like seeing the company and like see how it runs, and I've been watching those vlogs of like behind the scenes, which like I don't follow any American sports, so I don't like following that stuff. But it's just interesting to see that there's so many different creators within one big company. So it's like if you subscribe or you give money to Barstool at some level, you get access to all these other like personalities and brands. So I think there's so many people now creating a rolling fund. We're doing one. Heels is doing one. People like Greg Eisenberg doing a sort of little startup studio, which I think are really interesting. Because it's like, well, we want to invest in some companies, we want to buy some companies, we want to start some companies. We've got a podcast, we've got a video series, we've got a newsletter.
Yeah.
So I think there's going to be more of like these mini studios. Maybe that's where like everyone starts little side hustles, and then brands start like getting them, but keeping them alive within their own little thing, and there's like a weird media bubble of that. I don't know if that's good or bad. I think that might be where it goes. People start acquiring personalities and
it definitely seems like there's a bit of sort of unbundling and rebundling going on, where like journalists, for example, instead of being bundled together in like The Economist or the New York Times, they all have like their own newsletters, but now people are starting to bundle those together as well. And so, it seems like, maybe like 10 or 15 years from now, we'll just have kind of killed off the old institutions and we'll just have new ones. And maybe every 50 years or so, that's just how it has to be.
Maybe the corrections have to be, because the bundling or the unbundling seems to happen really slowly. There'll be big platforms happen, and the unbundling happens when they're at like a critical mass of a certain like space.
Yeah.
Then that like really unravels really quickly, and then everyone just goes, "Yep, also do that." Lots of them. So then it might be that the correction is okay. Well, now we bundled it again, but in a slightly
different way. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, that's. I mean, I don't know if that's net positive or negative for what the future can hold for people and sign off the things. Yeah, have you got any other thoughts on the no-code space as it relates to Causal and how you're thinking about what's next and what's going forward?
Yeah, so I think like I'm still the thing I'm still trying to figure out is like, you hear all this stuff about like, you hear a bunch of people saying like everyone should learn to code, and then you hear a bunch of people saying no, you don't need to code anymore because we have all this like no code stuff. And I feel like there's probably like a somewhat coding style skill set that it's still useful to have, maybe knowing like SQL or knowing a bit of JavaScript or something. And it feels like the 80-20 solution or whatever is that like some no code tool does like 80% of it for you. But if you know a little bit of programming, then you can like fill in the gaps yourself. And so I'm curious as to like what the filling in the gaps will end up being. Certainly with Causal, we've kind of found that, like just via the UI in the product, you can do like almost everything you need. But then some people have some like really weird edge case thing that they're trying to do. In a spreadsheet, you'd like hack this with some crazy formulas and things. In Causal, you can write a bit of code to do it, to sort of fill in those gaps. And so I feel like, yeah, I'd probably say that like no code can get you most of the way there, but it might still be useful for some people to be able to kind of do the extra bits on top of that to sort of take their stuff to the next level.
Yeah, and that's what I think the weird polarizing code versus no code, they're not like complete opposites. What we are actually is very much just in the middle ground of we just can't code. And I'm definitely guilty of saying don't learn to code as the first step. I think it learn to do the stuff with no code, because when you get to your project is 80% of the way there, and then you understand what a front end is, which is Webflow, what a back end is, which is Airtable, what your data piece is, Causal and Zapier, doing everything together. You then realize if I could just do this other thing, then this thing could really go to the next level and be software or whatever it is.
Yeah.
It's when you're doing that and you can see the pieces, you know how they work together. To be like, okay, I'm just gonna tweak this Zapier thing, and then you're touching APIs, and you might start recognizing how that works. Like, okay, I just need a code snippet. Especially a very quick path into like this can get technical really quickly. And things.
Yeah.
I mean, we don't like saying about no code so much on the Makerfight side because of this. Some tools that we have favorable. It didn't call itself a no-code tool, and rightly so, because now it's got a scripting block. Imagine they said, well, no-code's cool, and now we've got a scripting block, the no-code community being up in arms. But it's like, well, yeah, you can do most of the stuff. And then if there's, like you said, an edge case or something really peculiar you want to try and do, then code might be the way to do it. But the way you got to that stage was through this no-code piece in the first place. So I think the default is don't learn to code, but in my opinion, obviously, because at some point you'll figure out, do I need to code or not? Do I need to learn to code or not? Do I need someone to help me do the thing? But you might never need to get there. You might just launch a newsletter on Substack. That's actually the thing you were trying to get through. At least from what I see.
Yeah, no, I think I definitely agree with that.
Awesome. Well, it's been so good to have you on the show. I really appreciate it. We are proud to have you on as one of our newest partners, and we can't wait to do some more content together. I think we've got a few workshops and things lined up. And some of those calculators and stuff we definitely get on the side, on tutorials and things like that, and we can start running some. We can see what the community can come up with and see the crazy stuff they do too. So I really appreciate you going on, and why don't you just tell the people where they can find you and Causal and everything else?
Yeah, great to chat. Thanks a lot. So you can find me at Twitter at Taimur Abdaal. We'll probably link to it in the show notes. Check out Causal at causal.app. And stay tuned for some MakerPad and Causal content. We have some webinars coming up and tutorials and things like that.
Awesome. Well, thanks so much.
Cool. Thanks a lot, Ben.